For you to really understand what this production meant to me, what getting to see this meant to me, I'm going to tell you a story about the time I tried to fly to America when I was 16, and I'm going to try not to cry. Oh my god, hey, welcome back to my theatre-themed YouTube channel. My name is Mickey Joe, and I am obsessed with all things theatre. I am a professional theatre critic here in the UK. I'm in Brooklyn, New York right now, but I'm so used to saying that. So right now, I'm in New York seeing a bunch of Broadway, off-Broadway, and American regional shows, but right before I left London, the very last thing that I saw was Stephen Sondheim's Old Friends at the Gielgud Theatre. I was invited to review one of its press performances prior to its official opening, and I'm so excited that I got to go, because this is based on a one-night-only concert that took place earlier in the year that I wasn't able to attend. So thrilled to have finally been able to see it, and I'm going to tell you all about it today, as the musical theatre, and specifically Stephen Sondheim superfan that I am. I love you, Stephen. Side note, I saw Merrily We Roll Along on Broadway last night, and if you could see the amount of merchandise I have in my suitcase, just there, you would believe that I am a Stephen Sondheim superfan. So if you have no idea what this show is, maybe if you don't even know who Stephen Sondheim is, I'm going to tell you all of that. We're going to give you the context of this production, and then rather than doing a official review, because this is not really a structured narrative piece so much as a sort of a glitzy concert, a bit of a review, I'm going to tell you what I loved about it and just a couple of areas for improvement. But broadly, I want to let you know straight off the bat I had a pretty sensational time, because this is a very special evening for reasons I will explain today. So stay tuned to find out all about Old Friends at the Gielgud Theatre. If you enjoyed today's video, make sure to subscribe to my theatre-themed YouTube channel. There will be more reviews coming very soon. There will be more reviews of Sondheim musicals coming very soon. I told you I saw Merrily last night. What I haven't told you is that I'm seeing the last ever Stephen Sondheim musical world premiere production next week. So to make sure you don't miss my coverage of those, make sure you're subscribed. For now though, let's talk about Stephen Sondheim's Old Friends in London. Okay, so like I mentioned, this was based on a concert that was staged earlier this year, and it was paying tribute to legendary Pulitzer, Tony Award-winning composer, lyricist Stephen Sondheim. It's been put together by his previous collaborator, Sir Cameron Mackintosh, obviously a big force in the theatrical sphere in London, the producer behind Cats and Les Miserables and Phantom of the Opera and Miss Saigon. And although it's such a fitting tribute in the wake of Sondheim's passing, this show was actually in development prior to that. He was planning to put Old Friends on anyway, and I think Sondheim knew about it. He was planning to do another collaboration. So in terms of their history together, Cameron Mackintosh has produced multiple Stephen Sondheim reviews before, that is, sort of plotless shows that feature a lot of Sondheim songs. He produced Side by Side by Sondheim in London, and he then produced Putting It Together on Broadway. The only sort of full Sondheim show he produced, I believe, was the original London production of Follies in 1987. But this one-night-only version that happened earlier this year had the most incredible star-studded cast, every name that you could imagine. Bernadette Peters appearing for the very first time in the West End, who is reprising that performance in this extended run at the Gielgud Theatre, which is fantastic, and a whole host of other starry names. So this version that's now happening as a limited run is essentially the same format. It's pretty much the same staging. That one was appropriately at the Sondheim Theatre. This one is at the Gielgud Theatre next door, and it has a slightly condensed cast, but by and large it pretty much has the same set list as that one-night-only version, which was also recorded. So if you've seen that, you have a pretty good sense of what the Old Friends currently in the West End looks like. Let me just give you a breakdown of the cast of this version of the show. So Bernadette Peters and Lea Salonga are starring. They are the headline name artists. I will tell you more about the material they are each performing later in this video. We then have co-starring Christina Lardo, Janie Dee, Clare Burt, who was a last-minute replacement for Hayden Gwynn, Damien Humbley, Bradley Jaden, Bonnie Langford, Gavin Lee, Jason Pennycooke, Joanna Riding, Jeremy Secomb, Jac Yarrow, Marley Fenton, Beatrice Penny-Torre, Harry Apps, Bella Brown, Richard Dempsey, and Monique Young. As a general overview, and as you often get with Sondheim things, this is women who have been integral to Sondheim productions for years, who have done multiple roles, who are hugely connected to his work, and men who were available and are very talented. Everyone involved in this is very talented, but by and large, it's a handful of women in this show that have much more of a connection to Sondheim material. There's also discernibly sort of two generations in this cast. There are a lot of younger up-and-coming performers, and they are more connected to Cameron Mackintosh shows. People like Christina Lardo, who has been in Hamilton, Harry Apps, who's been in Les Mis. There are a couple of Mary Poppins alumni in there as well, Bradley Jaden from Les Mis, of course, as well. And it kind of sets the tone for the whole thing that we have this balance of Sondheim and Mackintosh. Cameron Mackintosh's presence is definitely felt throughout this show. And in a little opening speech, it's made clear that they are going to focus on the shows that Cameron worked on with Sondheim. And he didn't produce all that many of his shows, like I told you, but we do get material from almost all of them. We have a company section, we have an Into the Woods section, my favourite. We have a little bit of Merrily We Roll Along, although not as much as I would like. We have a whole chunk of Follies, we have some Gypsy, we have a teensy bit of West Side Story. Those latter two, Sondheim only wrote the lyrics at the very beginning of his career. We have a little bit of Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum. We have a big chunk of Sweeney Todd to end the first act. We have a little bit of A Little Night music. We have very brief nods to the music from the film Dick Tracy, which Sondheim composed, and also one song from Passion. If you're a Sondheim fan, you already know which one. So off the top of my head, the only shows of his that aren't represented whatsoever are Roadshow, Do I Hear a Waltz, Anyone Can Whistle, Pacific Overtures, The Frogs, and of course his latest musical, Here We Are. That would have been a coup if they could have got one of those songs in there. I didn't even know what they sound like yet. And neither would the audience at the Gielgud Theatre. Now, before I tell you what I really loved about this show, the other thing I want to convey is how much this means to me, how much I love the work of Stephen Sondheim. This was how I really discovered musical theatre and its capabilities, and I think he is the foremost genius among composers and lyricists. That's not a unique opinion. I know a great many people feel that way. He is revered in the musical theatre world. I discovered Into the Woods when I was a teenager, and that just opened my eyes so much to what musicals could be and what theatre could be in general. And in terms of what I have gone on to do with my life, I owe an enormous debt of gratitude to Stephen Sondheim for helping me discover the love that I had for all of this. Now, bearing all of that in mind, let me tell you what I loved about this specifically as a Sondheim superfan. So I do want to talk about the performers. We have to talk about the performers. And you have Bernadette Peters and Lea Salonga. And I will admit, I raised my eyebrow just a little bit when Lea Salonga was announced for this, because she hasn't historically been linked to that many Sondheim shows. Bernadette Peters, of course, has. She was in the original Broadway casts of Into the Woods and Sunday in the Park with George, and she's been in major revivals of Follies and A Little Night Music, and bafflingly, she's only made her West End debut this year. I forgot Gypsy. She also did Gypsy as a child. But comparatively, Salonga, though she has done some Sondheim, has not done nearly as much. So I was curious about her casting, but this is where the Cameron Mackintosh of it all starts to creep in, because he has always been a huge proponent of her career after he worked with her and sort of discovered her with Miss Saigon, then casting her multiple times in Les Miserables. He has always supported her as an artist, which I think is a testament to how much he values the talent that he works with. I think that says an awful lot. Ultimately, what I think is the greatest genius of this particular star casting, and I said this to Sir Cameron Mackintosh when I was briefly introduced to him after the performance, is you have the dual power of Bernadette Peters doing everything you know she can do, everything you already love and revere her for. She's doing a bit of The Witch, she's doing a little bit of Dot, she's doing a little bit of Sally, she's doing Not a Day Goes By. It's everything you want from Bernadette Peters. She does Send in the Clowns. And then it's Salonga doing everything you never knew that she could do and opening your eyes even more to her capabilities as a performer. We already knew she was so talented, and she's now coming on the stage and saying, you didn't know I could do any of this. She is giving you Mrs. Lovett in Sweeney Todd, and this is not a concert performance. This is a layered and rich and deep character study of a Mrs. Lovett performance. She's hilarious, she's giving you an accent, she's fully costumed, she looks mental, and then she gives you Mama Rose later on. Like, as much as I love Salonga singing Loving You from Passion and giving you beautiful, pure, delicious Lea Salonga vocals that we know and love, her giving you Everything's Coming Up Roses from Gypsy, a new timbres to her voice, a new depth, a new power, where she's sounding a little bit Ethel Merman-like. Gone is the Disney princess Lea Salonga. She has such strength and such power in her lower register now. I was floored by this performance. Absolutely incredible. Circling back to Bernadette Peters, just before I move on, I need to articulate how much it means to me to get to see her on stage. She was really the route through which I discovered musical theatre, ultimately, because I found Into the Woods through her. I think I found her through The Muppet Show, of all things. I'm going to tell you a story about the time I tried to fly to America when I was 16, and I'm going to try not to cry. So at 16 years old, I counted all of the money that I had in the world, which was coins, and I put it all in a jar, and I took it to my parents, and I asked if I could fly to America to go and see Bernadette Peters in Follies, because that was just the most amazing thing to my mind that was going to be happening. And sensibly, they said no, because the money in the jar did not amount to anything near a plane ticket, and I couldn't fly to America by myself as a teenager. Like, even if they'd been cool with that at that point, financially, it just wasn't realistic. And so I made peace at that point that I was probably never going to get to see her on stage. So getting to see her for the first time in this production, and specifically in the second act, when she sang Losing My Mind, I just burst into floods of tears, because it meant so much to me to get to see her on stage after seeing recordings of her playing all these roles and singing these songs. I really never thought I was going to get the chance, and to me, she is one of the greatest musical theatre performers that we've ever had. The way that she brings all of her vulnerability, the way she's heartbreaking like no one else is. She acts through song with such purity and such depth, and she's such an incredible, phenomenal actress. Okay, got through that. Let's move on. Then we have such wonderful support from the featured actresses, from Janie Dee and Joanna Riding and Clare Burt, each of them brilliantly witty and just wonderful. Janie Dee performs this standalone song called The Boy From ... which is Sondheim's take on The Boy from Ipanema. And the way she lands this comedy, the way that the punchline of the actual title and the end of The Boy From gets a laugh every single time, even though the lyric doesn't change, and we know that it's coming because her delivery changes subtly. She is a master comedian and wonderful in that sequence. I also love when she's performing You Could Drive a Person Crazy, how she does this hair flip as she moves into the next section. I will say of Janie Dee as well, I have seen her play Desiree in Little Night Music, and she was wonderful, but she sings the role of Charlotte Malcolm in this version of A Weekend in the Country, and she is such a perfect Charlotte. I love that even more for her. Joanna Riding throughout is making these mad, wonderful comedy choices. She appears from behind a piano during the Broadway Baby sequence that is lifted right out of Hey Mr. Producer, when all of the actresses are singing together and competing in this sort of mock audition style sequence. She also sings the formidable Not Getting Married Today, and she does a great job of it. And then Clare Burt, who was a last minute addition to this cast, replacing Hayden Gwynn, is glorious. She wears a bunch of different wigs in the show, which I just love. She sings the role of Joanne in the company scenes. She sings the iconic song Ladies Who Lunch and is ferocious with it. And we also have theatrical legend Bonnie Langford, who appeared in a Sondheim show at a very early age, much like Bernadette. She played Baby June in Gypsy. She played it in the West End, I believe, and then on Broadway with Angela Lansbury. Bonnie is this iconic stage performer, still an incredible dancer. She drops into the splits in Broadway Baby, which is thrilling. She also gets to sing I'm Still Here with some rewritten lyrics in the middle, which bring all of the ideas of the song a little bit more up to date, because some of the references in it are a little bit dated and don't necessarily make as much sense out of context. But in this kind of a setting, that song absolutely demands someone who is this legend within the industry. And in the West End, Bonnie Langford is absolutely that. Your eye will always be drawn to her on stage because of this little twinkle, because of the way that she furrows her eyebrows, just because of the energy that she brings. She's wonderful. So I suppose I should also talk about the men. Very talented men in this concert. We have Jason Pennycooke, whose highlight moment is giving you Buddy's Blues. He doesn't have two girls to do it alongside him, as is traditionally done in the show, so he's kind of singing all the parts and putting on different hats and using props, which makes this a very challenging number to put across, where he's singing like, she says she really loves me, I love you. She says she really cares, I care, when he's trying to do it all by himself. And there are some clever but difficult to understand lyrics in that section where he's singing like, ideal, she avers, ideal, you've, like, there's some weirdness of those lyrics that it's hard to do by yourself. We have another song and dance man, Gavin Lee, who is wonderful as one of the three performers in Everybody Ought to Have a Maid. He also sings a male interpretation of Could I Leave You? It's a specifically gay interpretation of Could I Leave You? We have Jeremy Secomb reprising his performance as Sweeney Todd. He's menacing and fearsome and powerful and booming. And Damien Humbley, who I saw originally in Merrily We Roll Along, the production that is now on Broadway, he was playing what is now the Daniel Radcliffe part Heart of Charlie Kringus. He has some lovely, moving and sentimental material in there as well. I do also want to mention Richard Dempsey, who is among the ensemble cast and covers some of the male material. Now, the way that this works is this is a true company. It is just a group, and when those big name performers aren't singing their solo songs, they go back into the ensemble. Everyone represents sort of a unanimous chorus in this show, which I think is a lovely feature. It feels like a true company. There's something very classic about that we don't really get these days. But Richard Dempsey specifically, I wish he had more material in this show, because he has the kind of legacy with Sondheim not every performer on this stage has, specifically not all the men on this stage, because he was in the original West End cast of Into the Woods with director Julia Mackenzie. Now, Julia has directed this production side by side with director and stager Matthew Bourne and choreographer Stephen Mear. Julia is an absolute icon in the world of West End theatre. She was the original London Sally in Follies, the original London Witch in Into the Woods. She's also been in Sweeney Todd. She's a true legend of the London stage and has a profound connection with Sondheim material. Getting to see Bernadette Peters and Lea Salonga singing Children Will Listen from Into the Woods as cared for and directed by Julia Mackenzie, there is just so much history there in that moment. Bernadette and Julia specifically have shared a handful of Sondheim roles, and getting to see their joint interpretations of these numbers as performed by Bernadette, as directed by Julia, that's incredible. I should also mention the wonderful orchestra under the direction of Alfonso Casado Trigo. They sound fantastic. It's this full, lush sound that you wish every show had. And the set design by Matt Kinley with George Reeves' projections, with Warren Letton's lighting, looks so classy, so expensive, so lavish, so glorious. It does not need to go as hard as it does. You just have this stylish, glitzy blue stage for much of it, with this wonderful proscenium across the top, with these projections of Sondheim. You have these set pieces that come in for the West Side Story and Sweeney Todd sequences that look a little bit like the sides of the stage from Les Miserables. You have this classic Broadway-style archway of light bulbs with red curtains that they use in the second act for some of the Gypsy and Follies numbers. It's wonderful to look at, it's wonderful to listen to. I want to talk briefly about some of the material that they choose. I love that they do the putting it together arrangement of Being Alive. I think that's what this arrangement is from. That's the first place I heard it, at least in the Broadway production of Putting It Together. It's this beautiful choral version of the song that gives it more of this unanimous resonance rather than one individual singing it. Everyone is sort of talking about the shared need for companionship and togetherness and being alive, and in the wake of Sondheim's passing, it takes on this even greater meaning. I was absolutely destroyed by this montage of pictures that were projected while Bernadette Peters, joined by the rest of the cast, sang Not a Day Goes By. That was just devastating, but a very necessary part of a tribute concert like this. There was a lot of Cameron Mackintosh involvement in those pictures. It was like, here's a young Stephen Sondheim, and here's Stephen with Cameron, and then here's Stephen at another time during his life, and here he is again with Cameron. It started to feel a little bit like Cameron was grieving for his friend and collaborator, but publicly and with a budget, which, you know, if you can, why not? He's given us this concert, and for that I am nothing but grateful. So I've told you about what I loved about this. I wouldn't be me if I didn't have a lot of thoughts. With any Sondheim show, I am very picky, and I will always find little ways in which it can be improved. And for this, there are just a couple of little things. Now, I mentioned that Gavin Lee sings a male version of Could I Leave You? Not that he doesn't do a fantastic job, he really does. I just don't love reappropriating that song for a male voice and for a male characterization. I don't think he brings nearly quite as much bite to it as Janie Dee did, who is in this show, when I saw her perform it in the National Theatre revival of Follies. I also think there are some performers whose skill set lends themselves to slightly different material than what they were given to work with. Bonnie Langford does a wonderful job of I'm Still Here, but it does feel like a little bit of a vocal mountain for her to climb. Whereas if she was able to do more of a dancey number, something like the story of Lucy and Jessie from Follies, not that we don't have a lot of Follies in this show, but if she was able to do something that shows off her still incredible dance ability, that would prove even more show-stopping. I have one really specific weird staging note, which is Damien Humbley sits alongside Bernadette Peters as the introduction to Send in the Clowns plays, and then he leaves right at the beginning, and Send in the Clowns only makes sense if she sings the first few verses, the first like 75% of the song, to him. She is singing to Frederick, and then the mood of the song changes when he leaves the room before the last verse, and you find out that the whole thing has still been some kind of a performance. She's pretending to be vulnerable to a certain extent, and then right at the end she's saying, well, that didn't work, and that's what the lyrics are implying. So if she sings the whole thing to herself, it doesn't really make as much sense. I also wish we could have had Bernadette doing a little bit more Sunday in the Park with George, and I'm suspicious of the fact that Mandy Patinkin is going to be in London very soon, and either she's got to be appearing at his concerts or he's got to be appearing in this, but they can't both be in London and not be doing something together. I also think we've had so many different Sondheim concerts. There was a Sondheim at 80 birthday prom, there was a similar birthday concert in the States. There have been so many Sondheim reviews, whether it's been side by Sondheim, or Sondheim on Sondheim, or Putting It Together, or Marry Me a Little, which was a review full of cut songs from other shows. I would love for one of them to introduce the songs we don't often get to hear in these settings. Again, watching Merrily last night, I thought to myself, why do we never get Franklin Shepherd Inc. in one of these out of context? Let Damien Humbley recreate his performance and do that in Old Friends. That would be a great idea. There are certain songs we get every single time. It baffles me that they will continue to put the little things you do together in this. Yes, it has witty lyrics, but I don't think it's nearly as funny as a bunch of other stuff he's written. I also would have liked to hear The Best Thing That Ever Has Happened to Me from Roadshow. I think that's a beautiful song and people sleep on it. There's a wonderful little note right at the end where they play a recording of Sondheim singing Love Is in the Air, a cut song from A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum, which can be heard in the film The Birdcage. Fun trivia fact for you there. But I do think it would be nice, especially for the Sondheim nerds like myself, if there were a few more little deep cuts alongside the material that we hear all the time. And it's nice to pay homage to the scenes from Hey Mr. Producer, to have the You Gotta Get a Gimmick, to have the Broadway Baby, but it's nothing we haven't seen before many times. That being said, I could watch this again and again and again, and it boggles my mind that this isn't a one-night only concert. It felt like it should have been. That's how special this thing was. It felt like a one-off presentation. The fact that this is just running in the West End and I can go back and back and back on like a midweek matinee, and I shall, and you will probably see me there if you're going, that I think is just wonderful. Hopefully even more people discover the brilliance of Stephen Sondheim musicals, and this is just the tip of the iceberg. Like, as fantastic as the songs are and the lyrics are, and they are, to have them in context with the full narrative thrust behind them in what are brilliantly put together collaborations of theatre with all of his book writers, with all of the incredible visionary creatives who have worked on these shows, is so much better than an out-of-context concert like this will ever be. So this, if anything, has made me so excited for hopefully many Sondheim revivals to come, both in the West End and on Broadway. For now though, that is what I thought of Stephen Sondheim's Old Friends, a great big Broadway show in the West End at the Gielgud Theatre. I hope you have enjoyed today's review. If you've had the chance to see this production already, or if you saw the one night only version of the concert early this year, first of all, very jealous of you. Second of all, make sure you comment with your thoughts down below. Which moment did you think was a standout? I would have to go for Bernadette Peters singing Losing My Mind, but there are so many you could choose from. I hope you've enjoyed today's video. If you have, make sure to subscribe for many more reviews and other theatre-themed videos coming to my channel very soon, including lots of Sondheim on Broadway content. For now, I hope that everyone is staying safe and that you have a stagey day. For 10 more seconds, I'm Mickey Joe Theatre. Oh my god, hey, thanks for watching, have a stagey day. Subscribe!